I just love this piano. I don't know how you got it here, but I think it's better than I remember it. So something is just really right about this. And of course, seeing old friends and seeing new friends. This is why I go around and play music and share music with people, because we, the artists, were nothing without our audiences. And so it would be just great if you know, stay and visit and maybe even like some of it and tell me about it. So I plan my next program accordingly. So there's another thanks that I would like to express, and this is to Victor and Galina Gritsuk, who brought me here time after time, and are a wonderful bridge, and I think people in the community. So thank you, Victor. Thank you, Galina. They're hiding there. Thank you, guys. The next on the program, I chose to play the Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven. And, well, of course, people are familiar with it. The trick is, actually, there are 3 parts in this sonata, and people usually know the first movement. But there's a second, and then the third, which is actually quite a show, a knuckle buster, as I like to call it. The piano will be okay. So 3 movements. This music has been used and used some more. I went on the internet and I think I found 74 Hollywood movies in which this music was used over the years. I think it's because it's just great music. And so sometimes that's a good enough reason to share it, I think, or most of the time, and I happen to love it. I'm not going to compete with Hollywood movies. I'm not going to have the fireworks here. It's all in the music. And imagine in the time when Beethoven lived, who was born in Germany but fairly quickly moved to Vienna, Austria. And I heard that in the course of 10 years, he changed 28 apartments. And maybe that's something about his personality, but doesn't show in his music. I think it's an absolute work of genius, and I hope you'll agree with me when I'm through. So please enjoy the 3 movements of the Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Maybe I should quit while I'm ahead. And I wasn't sure if we should have an intermission. Feel free maybe to stretch or whatever, but no dancing in the aisles. Not with this. People will say, so you're going to play a concert and not include any music by Chopin? So I decided not to take my chances and give you some Chopin before, things get tough. Funny enough, in working on this sonata that you just heard, that last little run that suddenly just time stands still goes note for note. Fantasie-Impromptu by Chopin. Whether it was on accident or there was some kind of intention, I had to grab my magnifying glass and compare the two runs. But it's in the same key, exact same notes. So go figure. I'm not going to play Fantasie-Impromptu because you already heard half of it. But three things by Chopin I chose to play for you. Well, Chopin, of course, was born in Poland, but quickly, when he was barely 20, moved to Paris and remained for the rest of his life. So the French people like to say, oh, he's our composer, and Poles, of course, have a very hard time with it. So, same with Rachmaninoff. Russians say he's a Russian composer, but he spent, 40 years in Hollywood, so go figure. He also had an apartment in New York. Anyway, we will get to Rachmaninoff in time, if any of you are still here. Three pieces by Chopin I chose to play. He composed a set of 24 etudes, which is a study, so an exercise. But he just stormed into a musical scene in Europe with this completely new technique and new attitude towards the exercise, the study, the etude. And you be the judge. I will play an etude, and then a nocturne, and then an etude. And so the nocturne that will be sandwiched between the two etudes is an additional nocturne. The story says it that he was leaving somebody's house, and in the guest book, instead of writing, "That was a nice evening, thank you for the great food," he wrote this nocturne. Another story is that it was a letter to his sister, and he just wrote and he said, "For your amusement, I send you this piece." So it was not included in the main collection of nocturnes, which is translated as a night songs, so maybe something around the Valentine's Day. But this particular one was made famous by a movie, The Pianist. So very beautiful, soaring melody that, again, has no story, but you are to provide your own meaning. So bring your own meaning to these three pieces. Chopin Etude in E minor, Opus 25, number 5. Nocturne in C sharp minor, Opus Posthumous, which means it was published after his passing. And Chopin Etude in E flat major, Opus 10, number 11. For those of you music history buffs. The rest of you can forget it right away and just enjoy the music. Thank you. the sweet sound of applause. Thank you. There's no better reward than this. I thought maybe we just take a little detour to the country of Russia, this small place across the globe. You know, I always think it's almost 7 in the morning there right now, but there's like several time zones. I'm not good when we talk about politics, but I know a little bit about music. So then we should probably use our talents the way they were designed. And I stick to music and talk about the Russian contribution to the piano music. It started with Mikhail Glinka. I mean, there were composers before him, but Glinka really made it professional. And he wrote nocturnes, just like Chopin. But since he was born 6 years before Chopin, I like to say we were there first. So we're talking 1804 versus 1810 for Chopin, the birth dates. But this nocturne reportedly also was written as an entry in the guest book, although apparently he stayed a couple days there in that house. So he has a better excuse in 2 days to write something. This was called a Nocturne Farewell, and it's probably one of my favorite pieces to play. I don't want the other of my favorites get offended here. So this nocturne got me enrolled in a special music school. This nocturne won me a couple competitions, and so see if I can win your hearts with that. So I probably would like to dedicate it also to my beautiful wife, who's here. And I hope you enjoy it and keep her good company. So. Well, unfortunately, Glinka's life was fairly short. He died in 1857, and in 1862, the first Conservatory of Music was opened in St. Petersburg, and the first graduate out of it was named Peter Tchaikovsky, who graduated in 1866 and was invited to be a professor in the Moscow Conservatory that opened in 1866. The salary was so-so, but for him to be a professor right after graduating, he moved to Moscow. And he started a great thing. In Moscow, we're, of course, very proud and thankful for all his legacy. But I'm going to skip the Tchaikovsky altogether and talk about Moscow Conservatory, because that's where I went. So never mind the St. Petersburg Conservatory. There were three boys there at around 1890s. They, of course, all adored Tchaikovsky. They studied with him and tried to write just like him, but then they branched off and developed individual styles while keeping this tradition somehow. Those three were awarded the big gold medal upon graduation. They graduated both as pianists and composers and conductors, and they were different age from 15 to 23, I think. But it just so happened it was, I think, the same year or the very next year. So they were Rachmaninoff, Medtner, and Scriabin. So, and then Medtner went to England, and Rachmaninoff eventually settled in America, and Scriabin just unfortunately died very young. I wanted to present one piece from each composer, and you will see how they're different and yet the same. Starting with Nicholas or Nikolai Medtner. This piece is entitled Canzone Serenata, so a singing style, and that's what pianists are trying to do to prove that this wooden box can sing just like a person. And we will die trying, but some are more successful. So this one is an evening song, and what I like about it, it starts and ends just like a frame on the photograph. You can see like a little vignette, and so you'll recognize when it's over and when it starts. I think it's very nostalgic and beautiful, and I hope you enjoy it. I will follow it with a Prelude by Scriabin. I like his first name, Alexander, and he wrote this for the left hand alone. If you close your eyes, you will probably think I use both hands, but if you open your eyes, don't fall asleep, but you will see that I'm using one hand. And then I will play a Prelude by Sergei Rachmaninoff. Again, no title, but I like to think about when, you know, the Rogue River gets really big in the spring, and that kind of starts from the small creek and evolves into something really big and beautiful. No flood, no, just a full big river. So please enjoy. What am I going to play? I talk too much, so that's the problem. I will play Medtner Canzone Serenata, and then Prelude for left hand alone, and then Prelude for both hands. Scriabin, Rachmaninoff. Enjoy. you're not getting out of here so easily. Just one little jump to Hungary and to the music of Franz Liszt. After that, we'll be done, I think. But his contribution for music and piano music in particular is just incredible. His long life for those times, he was born in 1811, died in 1886. He was 6'2", which again, for that time, he was just a towering giant. And him being Hungarian and shocking everybody in Paris and anywhere he traveled. What a figure. Some composers, well, most of them are characters, but not quite like Liszt. So he was the character of all the characters. To represent my respect to him and the scope of his literature, I chose to play 3 pieces for you. And I would like to start with the Widmung, which is German for dedication, or actually the vows. The song was written by Robert Schumann for his wife, Clara. But it was so beautiful, so Liszt picked it up right away and he said, I don't need no singer. The piano can do it all. The accompaniment, the song, the melody, well, you be the judge. I think it's a great arrangement. So, Dedication, which was Franz Liszt's arrangement of the Schumann song. By the way, he also arranged all 9 Beethoven symphonies for piano solo, and lots of operas, and it's huge. Anyway, I'll spare you. I would like to continue with Liebestraum, because when you hear Liebestraum, you'll recognize it, and that's, again, the Franz Liszt. And then I will finish, if I don't collapse, with his 15th Hungarian Rhapsody. That's called Rákóczi March. And it was quite brave of Liszt to use the folk tune, which was used like the French Marseillaise. It was a call for freedom. It was a song that Hungarians sang to proclaim their independence. And so quite brave. I think the fact that we're in this country, for me, I really respect the independence that people have here. If you don't appreciate it, think back to Russia. So anyway, I'm very proud to be here in front of you and play these 3 selections of Franz Liszt music: the Dedication, Liebestraum, and the 15th Hungarian Rhapsody, Rákóczi March. Enjoy. Thank you for being here.
Traditions are an interesting thing, aren't they? So Dr. Tutinov has been a tradition here, and then somewhere it got lost. But tonight we brought him back. And you all can be seated. You all can be seated. As we were standing at the door, somebody who's familiar with the tradition said, "Where's all the food?" You can't have Dr. Tutinov here without the food. I mean, how are we going to meet him? How are we going to talk? How are we going to fellowship? So my wife missed your concert, along with a number of people who are downstairs, and the food is all prepared. So I think that this deserves an encore. So we'll let him play, and I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but of course a concert pianist has to be giving concerts just to make a living, you know, and he actually broke his leg. So we have something in common. We were both for a short time using a cane, him longer. And, and we've discovered that you get treated better when you have a cane. So we're going to try to treat him better if, on the way out, you would like to leave a little contribution of thanks to Dr. Tutinov. The buckets will be there in the back door. Once you leave, you'll go to the left, you'll go down the stairs, and the food is all prepared. And we want to thank you again. What a pleasure. So without any further ado, I'll turn it back over to him. As soon as he's done, you will not crowd him. He will be escorted downstairs. That's where you'll visit with him. Thank you.